But I do know this: if it were legalized, and I'm not advocating that, I'm just speculating, the price would go down and it would become much safer because it would be controlled.
Yeah, and I mean that is certainly a theory. Steve, I appreciate the call. Thanks so much. It is a Free for All Friday here on La Crosse Talk PM. The theory long has been that if you make those illegal drugs legal, then the price will go down. Does that work? You know, this is interesting because this is April 20th, 420, which has significance to pot smokers.
I had a question for you. What was the point you were trying to make about the prescription drug abuse difference and the, just regular, always illegal drugs and the crime that goes with them?
The prescription drugs are, although they're legal and regulated, they're still available through your grandma's medicine cabinet and still sold on the streets illegally because they're available, and because something is legal and regulated doesn't mean there's not a desire to use it to have some drug escape in your mind. So just legalizing drugs does not remove the illegal use of them.
I'm not so sure. I mean, that's not really a right example. I mean, because you can't just go and get a prescription drugs to get high. Like the legalization movement's talking about, not having a reason for why you have to, why you're obtaining a drug. So a prescription drug, you can't say, well, there'd still be a criminal element to it if it was legal, because look at prescription drugs. Like, no, there's a prohibition on people getting prescription drugs unless they go to a doctor and jump through all these hoops.
Right. But don't you think that regulation of drugs like heroin would involve regulation like that, is involved with prescription drugs? I mean, you're not going to just stop by Quick Trip and get
legalized heroin and a lot of the prescription drugs that people use.
Yeah, I know exactly, but I'm talking about. I mean, do you believe that there's going to be recreational? I mean, you're going to be able to pick up your packet of heroin at Quick Trip. That's what I'm asking.
I'll just say there's going to be problems if the government continues to try to regulate people's behavior and has this prohibition on what you put into your body. As long as there's those barriers,
correct,
there's going to be a criminal element and negative consequences, unintended consequences, and money wasted fighting a losing war on drugs. I mean, there's definitely going to be problems.
I think by and large that's accurate. With prohibition comes the illegal nature and the criminality that goes along with it.
Yeah, people are still going to get high, still going to use drugs, whether they're legal or illegal. So let's look at that. Let's accept that fact, and let's stop living in this dream world that we're going to stop people from using drugs. It's not going to happen. So what's the best way to deal with the problems associated with that? To have it out in the open and to deal with it like alcohol problems and as a health issue, I think that's a lot better way to deal with it than just throw people in cages. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We have more people in prison per capita than most countries in the world right now. I mean, that's wrong, and then a lot of that's because of this war on drugs, which is not a good one. So. Yeah,
a lot of that is also through the use of alcohol and people getting liquored up and killing other people. I mean, true, well, but then that's a regular. That's a great example of it's just out there sitting on the store shelf for everybody that's over 21.
Well, I don't think there's as many people in prison for problems with alcohol, or maybe they committed crimes on alcohol. Sure.
No, I'd agree with that.
There's a lot of people in prison just for using drugs.
Yes. And
for selling drugs and that sort of thing. Right. So, which isn't which I don't agree with, but. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's a great point. You're absolutely right that it's the prohibition of it. It is the criminal nature of it, which leads to so many of the problems that we're dealing with, without a doubt. Do you think that it would be an even trade, or not an even trade? I guess. Do you think that we would have fewer problems then without any regulation of these controlled substances? Yep.
Oh, absolutely. You wouldn't have the criminal gangs. You wouldn't. It's just like when we got rid of prohibition. We didn't have the gangster problem as bad as we did during it.
Yeah, true.
I mean, so definitely we would get rid of a lot of the problems. We wouldn't have no problems. There'd still be problems with drug use, and people would still be overdosing, and that's going to happen no matter what.
Right.
And we have to treat it as a health issue with people, an addiction problem, but yet we're just going to go and throw you in jail and, you know, that sort of thing. It's not working. And you had the police chief on the other day, but a lot of what he's saying, like, this has all been, it's just a failed policy. How we're going to deal with things going on in La Crosse, you know, I understand he can't really change the laws there, but, you know, this, what we're doing and what we're paying him to do and, you know, the people under him to do is just failing, and it's not working, and it's just in this merry-go-round, you know, in circle of failed policy. It just, we need somebody to really, you know, speaks an alternative solution, and I'm talking, you know, radical solution, like, leave us alone for what we want to put in our body or what somebody wants to put in the body. You know, let's recognize that people are going to keep using drugs no matter what we try to do.
All right.
And let's, okay.
I appreciate the call. No, thanks so much. I'm going to move on and get to the newsroom, but I think great points about the and when Police Chief Ed Kodracki was on earlier this week, he's dealing with what he has to deal with within the system where he works. In other words, the policies that he follows require him to point out that that illegal drugs or drugs on the street and the criminal activity that goes with them are what is causing so much of the problems in your community and many other communities with even property crimes, or as Steve brought up earlier, the prostitution. Somehow I missed all that.
And then your two callers ago, I agree with a lot of his points. I would also like to bring up, you know, he brought up prohibition, and when that ended, it ended a lot of the mob crime that happened then, and I believe if you ended the prohibition on current drugs, it would also alleviate a lot of that crime. But another thing that when prohibition ended, it also made alcohol safer, because a lot of that alcohol being sold back then was laced with many different things. It was cut with many different things, much like a lot of the illegal drugs are today. So you have a lot of ODs that happened not necessarily because they took too much, but because it was laced with other crap, and it was, you know, so not that I would take drugs, but it would at least make some of them a little more safer.
That makes a lot of sense. And when Chief Kondracki was here earlier this week, we were talking about the heroin issue and how you don't know what when people are when they're taking heroin, for lack of a better term, when they're taking heroin, they don't know what they're getting. They don't know how potent it is. They don't know what it's been cut with, and that's where you come up with the overdose death. It's kind of like now you get a bottle and it says it's a bottle of booze and it's 40% alcohol. You know what you got in your hand. You don't, you know, it's so,
Exactly.
I think you're right. A greater awareness that comes with really just in some ways labeling, you know, just a notion of what it is you're putting in your body.
Exactly. And like other callers have said, you're still going to have a drug problem. And like every other country, you're going to have about 2 to 4% of the population that's going to do the drugs. That's just proven.
Yep.
And so at least if you took away the prohibition, you'd have a little more control over what's going on. You know, actually getting rid of the prohibition would allow for more control. Believe it or not, because you could regulate the stuff.
There's so much criminal activity surrounding the sale of illegal drugs. Is it really realistic to believe that also would deplete to the point where it would be almost an afterthought?
I think so. I mean, you're always going to have a black market. You have black market for booze to this day and cigarettes. But overall, I think with the government regulating the sale of it, a lot of that criminal activity would go away. It would bring the price down. And so I think along with thefts that you see and things like that, I think those would diminish over time, especially for your recreational users.
Sure. Yeah, I suppose it's a possibility. Well, I appreciate the call. Thanks so much.
Hi, Mitch. I was just going to mention a couple things. All your people that are afraid to legalize drugs assume that if we make drugs legal, that everybody, all the normal people out there will go out and start using drugs and get themselves in trouble and cause all kinds of problems.
Yeah, it doesn't sound right, does it?
No. It's similar to what they said with concealed weapons. Now, today's paper, 100,000.
100,000, yeah.
Yeah, so the deal is here we've spent, this is going to sound bizarre, but this is a fact, we've spent trillions of dollars on the drug war, and we've lost it. And we're filling up our jails and our courts, and it doesn't work. So my suggestion is let's take 20% of the money that we've been spending and educate the people, but go ahead and make it legal, and let's see if it works, because what we're doing now does not work.
It's let's see if it works. It reminds me of my sister when she was my older sister when she was quite young, 10 years old, I think. She put our Siamese cat in the dog's house because she said, I just wanted to see if it would work.
Yeah.
And it didn't, actually, at all. Yeah. So it's a heck of an experiment.
It is, but we've been doing one for 40 years now that has failed, and everybody fails to realize that something else might be worth a try. And I can tell you that I've never used drugs other than a little beer, and don't intend to use drugs if they're made legal, and I suspect you won't either.
No.
And so what we're doing now just does not work.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that call. Thanks so much. And, it defies, for a lot of people, it defies common sense. And we talked about this last hour about the notion of legalizing drugs like heroin and cocaine and to some extent methamphetamines, but marijuana today is, by the way, it's in like 5 minutes, this rally in Colorado that drew like 13,000 people last year at a college campus. Where else? And they all got together and smoked at 420 because there's some association with somebody that used to all get together at 420 and smoke marijuana or something like that. Because they want it to be legalized. And I think that I actually just been instant messaging with a friend of mine from who lives in Denver and talking about the marijuana culture there because of all the little shops that sell medicinal marijuana. And of course, everyone's baked in Denver, right? No, actually, they're not. And that's kind of the point that Tom was making, is that it probably wouldn't happen that way.